in Afghanistan, the goal was initially to destroy the opium fields because the fact that we know that the Taliban derives revenue from those fields through their simply ability to levy taxes as a shadow government, but also their ability to engage in the opium trade, the number one export, I think, of the country. So that, but it was felt going into this surge that doing so would merely create an enemy that we didn't have, and that's the farmer. And so that the objective then was to say, let's hit it at the higher levels of distribution. Let's hit it at the processing. Let's hit it at the distribution or the transfer of these drugs, where we know that the Taliban are much more directly involved in gaining the money necessary to keep their operations going. And so that's where we are right now. And so we're working with farmers to try to get them engaged in crop substitution. So there are programs to do that. But I think that that's a correct policy. I think going directly and destroying their crops will create a whole new class of enemy. Not to say that some of them aren't Taliban by night and farmers by day, but creates a whole new class of enemy that we don't necessarily need.
We have a little bit more than 10 minutes left with our guest. He is Congressman Mike Coffman, Republican of Colorado, member of the Armed Services Committee, 6th District in Colorado, which includes the Denver suburbs, Aurora, Highlands Ranch, South Glen, and Littleton. What was your re-election bid like?
Well, it was very good. I mean, it's a good district. I was 66%, with the Democrat at 31%, the Libertarian at 3%. So it was a good year to run as a Republican. I think Charlie Cook said that an amoeba could have won in a competitive district in this year as a Republican.
I asked.
Not that I'm an amoeba.
I asked because there's the lead story in the Post today. It says that in a poll, many are still skeptical of the GOP. Public trusts Obama slightly more. It's an ABC Washington News poll. They talk about hearts and minds and that kind of thing. But the question for you is, what can your party do to solidify its election in the House to make people say, you know, we did the right thing?
Well, I think that it was more about the Republicans voting against the Democrats and voting for the Republicans. I think what the Republicans have to do is to prove that we're not the Republican Party of 2006, where the American people booted the Republicans out of Washington, D.C., and they lost control in Capitol Hill, and that we will stand true to our principles of being fiscal conservatives, of being pro-growth, in terms of economic policies. And so I think the American people are waiting to see what the Republicans will do.
Back to Afghanistan. Plug WikiLeaks into all of this, all of this action in the last couple weeks and months. What's the impact on Afghanistan?
I'm not sure that there's I mean, the impact on Afghanistan is probably the same with the impact everywhere. And the fact is that particularly on the State Department cables that were leaked, that were confidential conversations between ourselves and various leaders around the world, and those conversations were clearly confidential. And it's the question of, I think that we lost credibility, and leaders around the world trust us in terms of having conversations with us in the future that are necessary to move our policies and our interests forward. So it's a real concern. I think we went from a need to know doctrine in terms of classified material to a need to share doctrine in terms of allowing anybody with basically a secret clearance and access to the SIPRNet to have access to everything. And so I think now we know that that's wrong. And obviously I'm trying to get the Defense Department to move in a different direction, more back to a need to know doctrine.
Let's hear from Ventura, California. Matt, independent for the congressman. Hey, Matt.
Representative Coffman, nice to talk to you, sir.
Thank you.
I did not know that there were Republicans in Colorado. Very briefly, I almost have like a fourfold question, so I do want to be brief.
Sure.
I have never served in the military. My father did. He started off as a PSC in World War II and served in Korea and ended up a brigadier general.
Wow, my gosh.
My problem is, sir, given that you have served in both the first and the second Iraq Gulf War, in my mindset, again, I am pro-military. Unfortunately, I am anti-greed. And I feel our military is being used as a business enforcer. You could not say, I do not trust, I was a Republican as of 2004, I do not trust a former member or former head of the CIA, i.e. George Bush Sr., with power. You were sent into the first Gulf War, obviously to stem Saddam Hussein's control of Middle Eastern Iraqi oil. And then, and I'll kind of jump to my second point here. A few weeks ago on Fox News, Geraldo Live, they basically conceded that Building 7 at the World Trade Center could not have collapsed without some type of pre-planned demolition. Now, I just wanted to bring that up because this is where my point is going.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead, caller.
In 2004, when kids were coming back from this Iraq war, the grunts were saying, and I take it that you were an officer, sir, in the military.
Yeah, NCO in the Army, Officer of Marine Corps.
Okay. The grunts coming back from this Gulf War were saying that it is oil motivated and nothing more. So, to get to my point as briefly as I can, there are powers that be. There is a chasm between us, you as an elected representative, and myself, and you refer to it in yourself as that I am the American people, and we refer to you as the government. What is happening is, I'll put it to you this way. China, in every sense of the word, is a totalitarian state. Yet we do business with them. And the American government would probably have issue with doing business with them.
He laid a lot out there. What do you want to respond to?
Well, first of all, let me just say that the power of oil, I mean, oil is a significant strategic resource, and the fact is that when one possesses it, they clearly have the capacity to do other things like develop a military and threaten their neighbors and also threaten the flow of that oil. And so I think that certainly lends to the fact that the United States needs to develop our own energy independence, and I would hope that the rest of the world would follow suit, so we're not strengthening these totalitarian regimes in their saber rattling around the world and not just in the Middle East. I think the issue with China is of deep concern to me. It's what I would call state capitalism, where what you have is a nation state that is, I think, amoral at best in its foreign policy, and is not in line with the United States, whether it's on the issue of North Korea or Sudan. And so I think that they're a concern, and I'm watching that very closely, growing military power and obviously a growing economic power. And so I think we have to be very cognizant of the rising power of China.
Oceanside, California on the line now, Democratic line. Is it Pierre?
Yes.
Go ahead, sir.
Good morning.
Morning.
How are you doing?
Doing fine.
Senator Coffman, I just heard you comment on oil and terror, and it's kind of weird that we're talking about two different entities, which one is the terrorists, and the other one is the government and corporations and stuff. They shouldn't be terrorists shouldn't be together, like linking it that way. But anyways, my comment is basically almost the same as the one before, which is the concern about the military being used as a force for these big corporations now to basically push their agendas. And my question is it worth the sacrifice that not only American soldiers are having, but the people in America and in the world itself, for corporations that clearly are making a ton of money off of veterans prescribing them pills and getting better deals in the oil and foreign oil and all this stuff. And these big corporations that make trillions and trillions of dollars off of the people don't even support us at home, taking their companies away from America to places that they get better deals, and also using a monopoly system and, through Wall Street in our country to exploit us, and basically they don't really care about the American people whatsoever. Every third of the month, when veterans and seniors get paid, the gas prices go rocket high, and then they put them down when everybody else, all the veterans and stuff are broke, you know.
Thanks, caller. Mike Coffman.
You know, I think that the fundamental problem in terms of American foreign policy today is not what you would call corporate greed. It's what I would call idealism that was with President George Bush, who felt that America had a principal role in planting the seeds of democracy throughout the world, and that those seeds would sprout and grow and create peace and stability by spreading throughout a given region. And certainly that was the case in Iraq, with trying to establish a Western-style democracy in the heart of the Arab Middle East, and that continued on, that same policy, obviously in Afghanistan. That policy is continued, at least in Afghanistan, by this current administration. So I think that nation building as a principal tool for achieving America's foreign policy objectives is simply unsustainable, and I think that's the problem. I think we have a view in America, and it's, you know, I think it's good-hearted, but I think there's an element of cultural imperialism within it that says everybody really wants to be like us if only given the chance, and I think we really need to revisit that and be more realistic.
Before we get to the last call, Congressman, wanted to talk about Don't Ask, Don't Tell, because
Sure.
You're going to be asked to vote, I think as early as today, on a repeal, I guess a freestanding bill. And the New York Times does say that Congressman Hoyer, the majority leader, said he and Representative Patrick Murphy, a Democrat from Pennsylvania, would bring a standalone repeal as early as today. This comes in response to the Senate's failure last week to break a filibuster. What's the idea, the strategy today, and what's your thought on the policy?
You know, I'd very much, I mean, if the choice is between repeal legislatively and a court decision, obviously repeal legislative would be a more organized way of getting there. I have some questions that I put to the Department of Defense based on the study that I've seen as to how it affects, give me a breakdown of Army infantry, the 11 Bravo series, MOS, from NCO and officer, people that are at the very point of the spear, and their counterparts of the Marine Corps. And I really want to see that data. I think that it's probably through the roof opposed to reversing Don't Ask, Don't Tell. And so I don't think that, I've got some questions about the study today. If the issue arises right now, I'm certainly going to be a no vote on it.
Wyndham, Connecticut, that last call. Stephen, Independent, good morning.
Hey, fellas, Merry Christmas. I don't agree with a lot of stuff you say, Mike. Even though you're a pretty brave guy, I wouldn't be in Iraq. That's pretty scary, if you ask me. but you know, Kandahar is the political center of the Pashtuns. It's
right.
Historically all the leadership came out of there, and your tone is like almost anti-team. I think you should get back on the team. And I wouldn't even let you in my office if I was in charge, because this war is going to be won in Kandahar, and everything going on in Pakistan and in the north doesn't matter, because all the politics stem out of Kandahar. And if we lose Kandahar, the attacks on the West will never, ever stop. So I totally disagree with you. And I think the Cohen manual, which I read, is right on target, and I really back these guys. And I read that WikiLeaks report, and one thing I got to say about the American diplomats, us guys, is that what they said behind the back, in the WikiLeaks documents, which I read pages and pages of the Army stuff is almost hard to understand. But the diplomats, they're more like writers. You know, what they say behind the scenes is very much what they say in front. So a lot of these conspiratorial theorists, they should really, read some of the excerpts that in major newspapers, because I'm pretty impressed with our diplomats. And
let's get a final thought from our guest on Afghanistan.
Well, I would certainly agree with you that Kandahar really is the center of gravity for the Taliban, and that if in fact we do control, we certainly have nominal control of the urban area, and it's a large city in Afghanistan. We don't control the areas out, the agricultural, the rural areas outside the city, and that's something that we're trying to do right now. The problem is, again, doing the transfer, given the Afghans' lack of capacity for governance at this time. And so I think you're right in saying that we can't simply let Afghanistan fall to the Taliban, that it would in fact be used certainly to export terrorism. But I do believe that if we can go to this, if this current policy doesn't work, then let's go to more of a hybrid approach where it's counterterrorism, where it's again counterinsurgency in the areas where we have relative security, counterterrorism in the areas like Kandahar, maybe where we don't, and that as we develop Afghan security forces, as we develop their capacity, then let's have them do the heavy lifting and take areas like Kandahar with U.S. forces and NATO forces in support instead of us taking the lead on these operations. And in fact, one thing that the President has stated recently out of Lisbon is that by 2014, that we will revert to, that there will be a requirement as a benchmark for Afghans to take the operational lead on these on our requirements there, and I think that that's a very important distinction to make.
Our guest has been Representative Mike Coffman, Republican of Colorado, member of the Armed Services Committee. Thanks a lot for your time.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
We will take a short time out. I want to let you know that a little bit later in the program